Let's give a warm welcome to Jennifer Case.
Thank you. Today I'm going to talk about this line, the line between failure and success. I'd been having a recurring dream where I realized on the morning of the final exam that I'd somehow just forgotten to go to class all semester. And I wake up and my heart is racing. It's a ridiculous dream. I mean, who forgets to go to class all semester? But I found out that it's a very common dream, related to an even more common fear, the fear of failure. It's called aticophobia. And as a lifelong aticophobe, I've spent a lot of time talking about and thinking about failure and what it really means to be successful. And what I've discovered is that this line between failure and success, it's really thin. For a long time, I trapped myself on the wrong side of this line because I misunderstood what the true meaning of success really was. And I allowed that fear of failure to control my behavior. And when I came to terms with those things, I learned that what side of this line I'm on is all a matter of my own perspective. When I was young, I believed that to be successful, to have that feeling of personal accomplishment, it could pretty much only come from being rich. My mom was a teacher, but she took time off when I was young to help my dad make partner at his accounting firm. I'll never forget the day that he left. It was the morning after our 4th of July barbecue at the country club, and they walked in the room, and I was instantly terrified. The look on my mom's face was sheer devastation. I had never seen anything like it. She was sobbing, begging him not to leave, head in his lap. The love of her life, the sole breadwinner, was leaving her alone with 3 kids, and she didn't have a job. I made a decision right then and there. When I grew up, I would never put myself in an emotionally or financially vulnerable position that I witnessed with my mom that day. I would be successful on my own, and I was going to be tough as nails. It was right around then where I started repeating this mantra to myself: failure is not an option. Failure is not an option. But I would suffer a number of failures before I achieved any success at all. I was devastated when I had to drop out of medical school, or pre-med, in undergrad because I couldn't pass college-level chemistry. I was fired, but not by one, but 2 different employers when I was in college. I got married way too young, and I had to get divorced. And if I tell you any more, I'm probably going to run into that red wall, so I'll just stop right there. But trust me, there were more. Eventually, though, I found myself a lawyer, and I was working in a swanky downtown LA law firm, crisp modern furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows, and I was on the partnership track. Objectively, I had made it, but I didn't feel that way. I would set a financial goal for success. I'd say, I'm going to make $125,000 this year, and then I would make it. But you know what? I'm really going to feel successful when I make $150,000 per year. Do you ever notice yourself doing that? Moving your measurement stick for success? I learned a very important lesson. By constantly redefining the meaning of success whenever I achieved a goal, I was trapped on the wrong side of the line. Success was always just out of reach. and I would walk into court. I was so nervous, I thought I was going to puke. Combine the anxiety of being a novice with the agony of public speaking, and everything is on the record. But I was getting really good at that tough as nails thing. So I would walk into court, stand behind the podium and give my arguments. And nobody knew that behind the podium, I was shaking like a leaf. Still am. But back at the office, I wasn't fooling anybody. And I certainly wasn't making any friends. I am really embarrassed to say that in the 5 years that I was an attorney, I went through 5 different assistants. I was so concerned about people viewing me as weak that I came off as arrogant, bossy, and cold. So objectively, I had made it, but personally, I was feeling very unfulfilled. And then out of the blue, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who had an idea for a business and she wanted my help. We were going to collect used French fry oil from restaurants and turn it into biodiesel, saving the planet one French fry at a time. How could I say no? So I did something that I had never done before. I took a big risk, followed my gut, deferred my student loans, moved to San Diego, and started working for Sweat Equity. And the biodiesel industry, well, it's pretty much like riding a roller coaster. First of all, we're the commodity business, up, down, up, down. Second of all, we are heavily reliant on government tax incentives that come and go with congressional whims, up, down, up, down. But I didn't care about any of that at the time. To anybody that would listen, do you realize that biodiesel has 80% less petroleum, or 80% less emissions than petroleum diesel, and it's made right here in the United States? And yes, your exhaust, it's going to smell like French fries. Except that last part's not precisely true, but people really like it, so I leave that in. I would wake up in the middle of the night and my heart was racing. But this time, it wasn't that dream. This time, it was because I had an idea for the business and I had to write it down immediately. And I learned another very important lesson. It didn't matter to me that my credit cards were maxed and I was eating top ramen for dinner. I had found my passion. And in doing that, I saw my first glimpse of what it meant to feel truly successful. But I had another major lesson to learn. It was 4 years after we collected our first gallon of cooking oil when we finally had turned a profit. And then the biodiesel tax incentive expired. And suddenly we couldn't sell biodiesel at a competitive rate to petroleum diesel. And our company was in trouble. I remember the day that we had to announce a company-wide pay cut, and I stood up there in front of everybody and I said, we're going to be okay, we're going to get through this, stick with us. And then I walked into my office and I put my head down on my desk and I cried. Because I didn't know if it was going to be okay. It wasn't just me and my friends anymore at this point. Now we had employees and we supported entire families. And I was feeling overwhelmed with the pressure to make sure that everybody was being taken care of. And I was feeling so inadequate as the company's leader. So I did something that probably no other CEOs really do. When nobody was looking, I Googled CEO. I wanted to see if I was living up to what real CEOs were doing every day. One of the things it said was advocating for the organization in business and political arenas, essentially networking and lobbying, which I was doing neither of which. The majority of the biodiesel industry is located in the Midwest, in farm country. We're talking 50 million gallon a year biodiesel plants made with soybean oil. For perspective, our company makes 3 million gallons of biodiesel exclusively from French fry oil. So I never really thought that I was going to be accepted into that club. But I had a gut feeling, and I was desperate. So I scrounged up the funds and I bought a ticket to Washington, D.C. to attend the meeting of the National Biodiesel Board, our industry's trade organization. I walked into this fancy cosmopolitan hotel in downtown D.C. and it was like a record was scratched. The entire room was men, like 150 men, farmers, lobbyists, men in suits, probably real CEOs who didn't have to Google themselves. And I felt like they were all looking at me. I felt about this big. But as I'd been doing for many years before, I faked it till I made it, and I walked in and I talked to everybody and I said, yes, hi, my name's Jennifer, and yes, business is doing great. I totally lied. The whole reason I had gone there was because I was trying to connect to somebody in my industry, somebody who understood what I was going through. But when it came right down to it, I completely lacked the courage to tell anybody that I was scared for my business. I felt like as the only woman in that room, if I showed any weakness or vulnerability in the room of all of these men, I was somehow breaking the promise I made to myself when I was 8 years old that I was going to be strong and independent on my own. So when I left the meeting, I was feeling dejected and very, very much alone. I made my way down to the subway to get a train to the airport, and it was dark and it was loud, and I found myself staring helplessly at the interconnecting colored lines of the subway map that supposedly represent directions. But don't judge me because I'm from Southern California. It's not our thing. I was lost. Literally because I didn't know what train to get on. But figuratively, I was lost as well. How was I going to make it in this industry? How was I going to make it in life if I didn't have the courage to be myself? And I had an epiphany. It was time for me to let my guard down. It was time for me to stop acting like I had something to prove. On the verge of tears, I finally asked the kind-looking man next to me if he could help me. And get this, he happened to be one of the board of directors from the National Biodiesel Board, the industry trade group that I had just attended. This man helped me navigate the subway, and then he became my mentor. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And I got involved with the industry. And since then, I've had the amazing opportunity to represent small, sustainable biodiesel plants all over the country by testifying in Congress and before the EPA. And I made history when I was elected the first female board member in the National Biodiesel Board's history. And I learned another very important lesson. Faking it till you make it can only get you so far in life. At some point, you have to be willing to admit what you don't know. You have to be willing to admit that you need help, because otherwise you may miss amazing opportunities to learn and grow. And you may run the risk of being misunderstood, like I was back at the law firm. Because arrogance is really just insecurity in disguise. So whether I am the only woman in a boardroom full of men or whether I'm testifying in Congress on the record, I speak from my heart. I tell my story in all of its perfectly imperfect glory. Because in the end, it's that vulnerability that's going to make a connection to that person that you're talking to. The kind of connection that may motivate a legislator to vote in favor of the environment or small business, even though the oil lobby outspends biodiesel by like a gazillion to one. And it's that connection that has allowed me to have the same amazingly supportive assistant for the last 3 years. So here I am. It took me a really long time. I thought that in order to feel successful, I had to be tough as nails and make a ton of money. But what it takes to be truly successful, like truly successful, all I had to do was just be me. The biodiesel industry, well, it's still a roller coaster. We're actually in a really hard time right now again. Our tax credit is lapsed. But as for me, I no longer move my measurement stick for success. I love what I do, and that keeps me on this side of the line, no matter what. And I'm going to tell you one more story. My mom is now suffering with Alzheimer's disease. And as she's been slipping away from me, I've been reflecting a lot on how her story shaped me into the person I am today. For the longest time, I saw that she was so vulnerable during that time of my life, and I made a terrible mistake. I interpreted it as weakness. Although my father was never in my life, I was secretly thanking him for making me this strong and independent person, when all along it was my mom who provided me with all of the tools I needed for true success. My mom went out there after my dad left, and she worked her way up in education, eventually becoming the community college foundation director. And she made sure that all 3 of her kids went to college too. She was passionate about education. And she had the courage to show her emotions, be vulnerable. And because of those things, she will be remembered as one of the most loving, kindest, most generous people that anyone has ever met. My mom lived her life firmly planted on this side of the line. So go out there in your life and find your passion and take risks to do it. And don't get so caught up in the financial aspect of success. Don't be afraid to fail once in a while. Failure is definitely an option. And have the courage to be vulnerable. Be yourself. And you too can find yourself on the success side of this line. Thank you.
Tremendous power in entrepreneurship, but we have to unleash it. I tell my students, you can develop the winning number of a lottery. You can develop the winning number of a lottery. That's a lot of a promise, and I'm a cautious person. So what do we have to do to use this power of entrepreneurship? First of all, when we talk about entrepreneurship, what comes to mind first? That's capital. You need capital. So it's a problem. Next is, there are many ideas, but it's execution that matters. So do we know much about business administration? Are we good administrators? Most of us, me included, have difficulties to organize their own life. So how to organize a big organization? So no capital. not much knowledge in business administration. Yeah, can say chapter closed. Do we have a patent? No. Are we doing very good in high tech? Are we close to a research institution? Most of us, no. So chapter closed. We can say it's not available, it's not accessible to us. And I think that's wrong. That's wrong. And I want to show that we don't need much capital. We don't need much knowledge of business administration. That is totally in contrast to what everybody else says about entrepreneurship. I'm very well aware of that. And usually we don't have a patent. And I say we don't need a patent. But what we need is our brains. And we have to work hard with our brains. So there's a lot of problems in the world, which I do not need to tell in detail. And what we need is many more people to use their brains to help solve these problems. Climate change is one of them. So when I talk about entrepreneurship, I talk about innovative entrepreneurship, not setting up a new shop or doing something for self-employment. But we talk about innovative entrepreneurship, following Josef Schumpeter, an Austrian economist who has put that first, that innovation is of utmost importance. So how to create disruptive ideas? That sounds simple, but certainly is not. So I give you an example. Take tea. I'm more a coffee drinker, but let's take tea. So you easily can find out if you go to a tea garden and ask for the price, and you compare the price with in Germany or in our expensive countries with the same tea in a tea shop, you find out it's about 10 times more expensive. And that's not only true for tea, that's true for many products. So what makes tea so expensive? If you do a bit of research, and you have to do that. You have to do that. You have to go into that field, even if you don't have a professional background for that. I did not have any professional background for tea. You find out that the reason is that there is what you can call a convention. There are tea shops, tea usually is sold in tea shops, and these tea shops have a huge variety of teas. And the more variety they have, the better they are regarded. And it's that customers expect that variety. They do not want to drink the same tea all the time. And tea offers a huge variety all over the world. So if you follow that convention, tea is expensive because you have small amounts only. A good tea shop has about 300 different varieties. If you want to shop more, if you want to storage more of that, of one variety, you have to go to the wholesaler, and the wholesaler has the same problem with the huge variety. There's an importer, and then there's an exporter, and the exporter buys in the auction, and the auction gets the tea from the tea garden. So you find out it's the middleman. And if you really go into research, and you need not do any studying to do that research, my ears are not big enough for that. But you need the brain, not so much the ears. So there's a second thing, that is tea, again, conventionally, is sold in small packets. So why is it sold in small packets? One day with my coffee, when I held the coffee package in my hand, it's 500 grams. So why? Coffee is easily losing the flavor. Tea is not. For tea, you can take it for quite 3 years. So why is tea put in small packets and coffee in big packets? There's no reason for that. It's just convention. So if you break with these two conventions, big variety of teas and small packages, you will see that you can have a lot better cost structure. Your costs suddenly disappear. You can buy the tea if you stick to one variety only, but from the tea garden. Of course, you have to buy in bulk. You have to buy a big amount of tea. But if you stick to one variety, just the contrast to what the tea shop has, you save all the middlemen. You cut out the middlemen. And the same with the packaging. Why put it in small packets? Why not? If coffee is in 500 grams, so put tea in 1 kg packages. So you have one variety of tea only. You have big packages only. Probably if people ask you, you frankly have to say, I'm a professor. And I'm more a coffee drinker than tea. I have no professional background in tea, but I believe it makes sense. So first thing is, don't talk too much with other people about that. It will discourage you. Or if you go to a bank, it will be very discouraging for you. Don't do that. Stick with the problem. Stick with the idea. Is it making sense? And if you can have the tea much cheaper by just buying in bulk than variety, make use of it. Change the price of the tea. Change the structure of the tea trade. Say, I make use of my cost structure and I offer the tea for a margin for me, but at a very tremendously different price. So the story is just, that was what I did 25 years ago. And nobody believed in that. I was the only one. So you have to do it. You have to find out, does it make sense for the customers? If you can offer the tea for 1/3 of the price, will it work or not? Of course it will work. But you have to choose not just any tea, you have to take advantage that you save on the purchasing price. So you need not buy a cheap tea. You can buy an expensive tea. You can buy a very expensive tea. So next what comes to mind, and you see you have to shift the idea back and forth, you have to mull on it. If you say, I take the number one tea, Darjeeling province with very high altitude and so on. So I take the number one tea, particularly for comparison, because nobody believes that the professor provides a particular tea. But if I take the number one tea in the world, and that is Darjeeling, first flush, FTG, FOP1. So if you choose that variety, you can have all kind of comparison and people understand that it's something extraordinary. That's the story. And again, I was not a good organizer, not at all. No professional background in the tea business. Within a few years, we were the number one in the trade. It's not Lipton's, it's not Book Bonds, it's not Twinings. According to the statistics of the Indian Tea Board, we are the number one in the world for the importation of Darjeeling tea. So what is the point? The point is that you have an idea that you work on and you really work hard on that idea. It's not about capital. We ask customers to pay in advance. So we could have even started a bank in the beginning. So there was no need of capital, no need to go to the banks and explain it, an extraordinary idea. So what is next is to manage. So how to manage? I'm not a good manager. Ingvar Kamprad, who has created a very excellent furniture chain, IKEA, he said, I'm a catastrophical organizer. If you look into management, you see there's a lot of things. These are just the headlines, the general headlines. If you go more in details, now just take a German textbook about that, you have a lot of things that you have to do. Quite a lot of things. So it's again headlines, not the general headlines anymore, but headlines. So if you go into management and you follow the tradition of its execution, it's not ideas, it's execution, you have to counter with this problem quite a lot, becoming more. I could continue with that quite some time. So don't go into management. You are lost. Don't go into management. Stick. This doesn't stick well. Stick with your own idea. It's okay. Stick with your own idea and work on it. Work hard on your idea. Give the management to somebody else. Give it to somebody else. There are a lot of masters of business administration that can do it. That is one thing. Don't go under in management. You have to need your brains to improve your business model once you start it. And there's the second thing that I would like to show. Now this doesn't work anymore. You can use components. Instead of going into the details of management, you can use components. The idea of that is, if you have fruit juice, usually the producer adds a concentrate to water. You find that if you look at the bottle, it's always concentrate with water, mostly. So what you can do is, Do it yourself. Take the concentrate home, or as an entrepreneur, sell the concentrate, not the fruit juice, and let the people add water at home. Tap water is about 300 times more efficient than this water that you take and buy in the shop. So do we do the concentrate ourselves? Of course not. I have no idea how to do the concentrate. Oh, sorry. So what about, somehow we have problems. Yes. So we don't do the concentrate ourselves. We use that as a component. We don't do the packaging ourselves. I had no idea how to do packaging that it's not infected with something. So we don't do that ourselves. We use a component. We don't do the office ourselves. We have no own office. We use a company, that's one of my students. He has also a company here in Chiang Mai, Holger Jonssons, and we use that company, no own office. And what about accounting? We use another company that is doing the accounting for us. And what about logistics? Do we do the parceling and sending out? No, we don't do that. So you can put the question, what is the general manager? It's my assistant, Raphael. What is he doing? Not so much. He says, okay, you have to coordinate the components. And that takes about maybe half an hour a day. That's important because it means we have our brains free for thinking about how to get attention to that idea, how to get to the media, what kind of products other than apple juice to do, and so on. So we stick with entrepreneurship. We stick with innovative entrepreneurship. We do not go under in business administration and use components. So it has a number of excellent advantages. That is, almost no initial investment because you use components that exist already. You have almost no fixed costs. Why do people go bankrupt? Because they invested and there are a little flow of customers only. It takes too long time to really make your business well known and get customers. So in the meantime, you have liquidity problems and you go into bankruptcy. And you have a lot of extremely good advantages. You are professional from the beginning. Not because you are professional, I'm not an expert in fruit juice, but because your components are professional and you choose, of course, professional components. You are highly efficient. Usually you have to start small and wait until you grow and get into some kind of economies of scale. No, you start highly efficient, not because you are efficient, but because your components are efficient. And you are virtual, you have a problem when a journalist comes and says, I want to make an interview in your company. We say, we have a problem. Where is the company? You can come to my kitchen or we can meet in a coffee shop. But there is no company. Company is in our brains. And you are global from the beginning. And virtual, which has some advantages, as you know. So that is the point. Take a different view of the world. Don't follow the conventions. Don't follow the conventions. Be curious and free yourself of what people believe is the standard or is a must or anything. You have to work through the conventions, and that's hard work. You need to have your brains. So I think, having said that there is a chance for all of us. Everybody can do that, what we have done. You need the ideas, and not just setting up a shop and sell something, but to work hard on the ideas, mull it, shovel the parts around, move it around until the puzzle, I like to compare it with a puzzle, until the puzzle fits. And that takes time. It took me quite some time to develop T-Campaign and develop this idea that I use for showing the components. So I strongly believe it's the first time in history that almost everybody can become an entrepreneur, and a quite powerful entrepreneur. It's not the small size that is the problem, but the small size is a big advantage. So become a